Good evening and welcome to the Select Board's meeting for Wednesday, January 26th, 2022. This meeting is being held remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. My name is Katie Conlon. I'm the chair of the board. Could we all introduce ourselves, please? Arthur, I saw you, but you're on mute.
Arthur Doyle, Vice Chair.
Mike Zulus, Secretary.
Melinda Collins, member.
Richard Wells, member.
And the staff members who are here this evening.
Mike Dennehy, your town administrator.
Linda Napoli, Executive Administrative Assistant to the Select Board.
Thank you very much. So if we could start with the Pledge of Allegiance, we'll post online the photo of the flag and we'll stand and say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Do we have anyone for public comment this evening? If so, if you're an attendee and you're here for public comment, please raise your hand and we will recognize you. I don't see anyone with their hand raised, so no one for public comment this evening. So we will go on to, actually, I should probably mention at the very beginning, just so the board members and the public know, we do have a Governor Stoughton meeting at the end of this session. We have some representatives of the Milton Residence Fund coming in, so we're hoping to move as quickly as we can through the agenda, knowing that we have some guests joining us probably around 9 o'clock or so. Mr. Dennehy will reach out to them to let them know as we're approaching that time. And there will be at least one item that we're going to ask the board to defer, which is 15B, an appointment to the Conservation Commission, and to defer that to a future meeting. So the next item, number 4, is a departmental update from the Council on Aging. Christine Stanton is the COA director. Welcome, Ms. Stanton. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. I had some internet trouble right when I was signing on, so I apologize. Thank you, members of the board, Madam Chair, for inviting me to give a report. I wanted to start with a few numbers that from the latest 2020 US Census, that in Milton, we have roughly 4,900 people age 65 and over living in town, which represents 17% of the total population. And this is an increase of 16% from the 2010 census numbers. So this trend is expected to accelerate as the population ages. Since my last report last summer, the membership at the COA is up 158%. We started with 838 members at that time, and as of Monday, we have 2,165. So that tells us we're servicing approximately half of the town's over 65 population. Over the past 6 months, we averaged 70 new members a month. So the word is getting out that the COA is the place to be in town. So since I reported last time, we've had 7,200 sign-ins. So that's in 6 months, so roughly 1,200 a month. So that's not 1,200 people, but that could be the same person coming to 3 exercise classes a week, something like that. So that's just programming, people entering our building as well as attending Zoom sessions. So on a weekly basis, we offer at a minimum 13 exercise programs, and they range from balance and arthritis programs to snowshoeing and hiking and to yoga. We just introduced a class called Ballet Bar, which is sort of a new fitness craze, and that really exploded our numbers. A lot of younger seniors were thrilled that we were offering it. It's quite a workout and appeals to a lot of people. We offer 11 social programs. such as the Talk of the Town breakfast, when we had different officials from Milton come and tell us what's going on in the town, and weekly coffee in the cafe, and 5 outreach programs. We also do educational programs, health programs such as diabetes. We partner with Laborie College, the students come over and do a blood pressure clinic for us twice a month, and class on healthy weight management. We also provide one-on-one technical assistance. We have a technical advisor who comes twice a month, 1 month to do 20-minute one-on-one assistance, another how to use Zoom, things like that. We have entertainment, monthly holiday luncheons, huge veterans luncheon. We have a Valentine's Day luncheon coming up, as well as a big St. Pat's party. We do offsite excursions, day trips. We've been to Newport, Cape Cod Canal, and New Hampshire, as well as various shopping destinations locally. And for social service, we get calls all the time for legal assistance, financial assistance, help with health insurance, SNAP benefits, and heating assistance. So the need is there in the town. And we're very happy to offer referrals to different people that we've made contact with who can help with that. We've really expanded our programs, which in turn are attracting younger seniors who wouldn't think of setting foot in a place called a senior center. So that's I'm very happy to see that our reach is expanding through the town. Innovative new programs include Turning 65, an evening health insurance information session we held last fall. We're partnering with the Milton Moves initiative with the Milton Public Library, and we offered a 4-week intergenerational Tai Chi class outside, and we're having an intergenerational line dancing class on Saturday, February 12th at the COA in partnership with the library in Milton Moves. We had a fabulous concert last fall put on by Riverside Theater Works, sponsored by Dolan Funeral Home. They performed in front of 90 people at the center. It was a really well-attended event and very enjoyable. And we had a holiday gift drive this year, which benefited the Milton Residents Fund, where people were encouraged to donate cash, checks, or gift cards to the Milton Residents Fund. And in outreach, we were awarded a $10,000 grant to be paid over 3 years from South Shore Elder Services. And that's to address food insecurity in the time of COVID. So we're working with the Milton Residents Fund to identify families that Noreen may know that we could give gift cards to. If anyone knows of any needy people over the age of 65 in town, please let us know. We'd love to reach these people and help them with food insecurity. It's out there. So just identifying the need is really what we're trying to do. We've responded to over 500 requests for social service referrals, assistance with everything from snow removal to residents looking for a handyman or a plumber. And we even had a request from a woman in Abu Dhabi who was looking for nutrition assistance for her ailing aunt and uncle who are Milton residents. And lastly, transportation. We've provided since last year 5,000 rides to medical appointments, grocery shopping, and back and forth to the senior center. In the past 6 months, the number of people using our transportation has increased 30%, 226 people versus 171 per month. So we're doing this with a lean staff full-time. It's myself and my outreach coordinator, Katie O'Brien, and our part-time outreach worker, Julie McIntyre. And I can't thank them enough for all the hours they've put in. We're thankfully adding to staff in the next couple of weeks, so we'll be up to staffing levels that we had previously. So I'm looking forward to that. And it's just been a pleasure to serve the seniors in town. And I hope to keep growing and providing needed services to those who need it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Stanton. Does any member of the board have any questions or comments? It was a good report on the activities of a department that has, all of them have faced challenges with COVID, and certainly the COA is one of the more impacted ones, with so many residents who were in a high-risk category and still wanting to avail themselves of some services. So thank you to the entire staff at the COA for all that you're doing. Any comments from the board? Any questions for Christine Stanton? Okay, Mr. Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Christine. No questions, just a comment to say that we have one member of our household who is very nicely balancing my time on the select board with her time at the Council on Aging. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Zulus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Christine, for the report. Christine, have you observed, are you aware of an increase in mental health issues among seniors during the ongoing pandemic?
Very much so. Very much so. And we actually were brainstorming today to try to bring in a session with a team through BI Boston, addressing topics such as insomnia, stressful eating, just general dealing with stress in general. And that we're looking to fund it, but it seems very good. It's through the Benson Mind Body Institute. And so we're getting, I think isolation was huge with seniors. And that's one of the things I'm very proud of, is that with Carolyn Kinsella's guidance and the health department, we were able to remain open safely and provide needed companionship, social opportunities, exercise classes, things that were good, that got people out of their home, chatting with other people, using their bodies. And it's just, yeah, I'm very proud of that. But yes, mental health is deteriorated, I think, throughout all ages. We see it in kids and seniors as well. And like I said, we're going to try to address that with a program coming up in the spring.
And if I may just follow up, Madam Chair, and Christine, you faded out a little bit when you talked about funding. So I don't know if that's an additional funding need you have. And so I guess the general question is, are there any funding needs that you have that could be used to address those issues?
Well, I hope we were awarded some ARPA funding, and so I'm planning on using that funding to fund this program. It's a little more money than our normal programs, but I think it's worth it in this time. So I think I'm okay with that. The only funding need that my number one request is a wheelchair accessible van to help our transportation and keep it going, because we're getting more and more requests for wheelchair transports. Once people are at that stage that they're wheelchair bound, their family can no longer transport them, and the cost for chair cars is exorbitant. So to provide that service for people is great. So I do have a request in for that. But otherwise, I'm very appreciative of the ARPA funding. When we haven't got it yet, but when it comes in, we'll put that to good work.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any questions or comments for the Council on Aging? Mr. Wells. You're on mute, Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I couldn't unmute myself. Thank you, Christine. Just a quick update. I'm holding the capital list, and I have the van for your request for the handicap van right here at the top of my list. So we have that, and we'll be going through those capital requests very quickly. So thanks for all your good work, and go home. You've had a long day.
Thank you very much.
Okay, if we have no other questions or comments, then thank you very much. It's always good to hear a couple of times a year during it's what's going on at the Council on Aging. So we appreciate your coming in and your time this evening, Christine. Thank you.
Thank you for all your support.
Thank you,
Have a
Christine.
good night. Okay, for items 5, 6, and 7, all of these relate to bonding, either for various capital projects or in particular the fire station building project. And I am going to be recused on all 3 items, 5, 6, and 7. So I'll ask Mr. Doyle to act as the chair, and I will exit the meeting and come back after number 7. Thank you, Arthur.
Arthur, you're on mute.
I
Vice
don't
Chair,
know how that happened. That was something that I hadn't engineered, I don't think. I had suggested that we have our good town treasurer, Jim McAuliffe, with us this evening for these bonding issues. And the first item under the bonding is the useful life vote for various capital projects. And Jim, we invite you to comment if you would like.
Okay, and first off, I'd like to thank Lynn and Karen for helping me put all the information together to get it over to the FA and to the attorneys, get that green light letter. And also, we have the 2 votes. The first one is for the useful life for the purposes that we're bonding tonight. And we just have to vote that now before we go on to the next the bonding.
We have a motion before us. Is
Um,
there someone who would like to move the motion, please?
I'm happy to do so, Mr. Vice Chair. I move that the maximum useful life of the following projects to be financed in part with the $2,925,000 capital project bonds authorized by the vote of the 2021 Milton Annual Town Meeting passed May 4th, 2021, Article 4 is hereby determined pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 77, 7, subsection 1, to be DPW Pinroth Sidewalk Tractor, $185,000, 15 years. DPW 3 to 5 ton articulating vibratory roller, $50,000, 15 years. DPW waster oil burner, $30,000, 15 years. Town facilities generator, $40,000, 10 years.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Richard. Any discussion?
Sorely needed and will be very valued when they arrive.
Thank you, Mr. Wells, indeed. Any further comment? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
and myself, yes.
Yeah,
Thank you very kindly.
And I just need that signed, and if I get that back to me tomorrow, so I get it over to the to our financial advisor, the attorneys.
That's the certification, Jim, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Mike Zulus, you'll be able to do that as Jim requested, as clerk of the board.
Sign tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, we could email you a copy, you could send it back.
No,
It doesn't have to be wet
I
signature.
can get in, Jim.
Okay,
Jim, I can get in early, and you're in early tomorrow. I can get in early tomorrow morning.
okay, that'll be great. And on the
Okay.
band.
Thank you, Mike. Jim, the second item, the bond anticipation notes for various capital projects.
Yeah, on the band, we had the auction yesterday. It was a successful auction. We had 5 bids, net interest cost range from 0.543 up to 0.980. The winning bid was TD Securities, and the net interest cost is 0.543. It breaks down, what the total fund source we're going to be receiving is $7,586,056.08. And that breaks down for the bond, which was $7,474,536. and a reoffering premium of $111,520.08. The use of the funds was total underwriter discount was $216,009. Cost of issuance is going to be $22,000. The deposit for the construction projects, $5,774,536. We renewed a note for $1.7 million. That was for the fire station. And there's going to be amount left over for the bond premium of $86,903.99. Our FA suggests that we hold that in reserve to make the payment of interest at maturity.
Any questions from members of the board for Mr. McAuliffe? Thank you. We have a rather lengthy motion here, and rather than punish any member of the board with the reading of it, I'll assume that responsibility. I move to approve the sale of $7,474,536 2% general obligation bond anticipation notes of the town dated February 17, 2022, and payable February 17, 2023 to TD Securities USA LLC at par and accrued interest, if any, plus a premium of $108,903.99. And further, that in connection with the marketing and sale of the notes, the preparation and distribution of a notice of sale and preliminary official statement dated January 18, 2022, and a final official statement dated January 25, 2022, each in such form as may be approved by the town treasurer, be and hereby are ratified, confirmed, approved, and adopted. And furthermore, that the town treasurer and the select board be and hereby are authorized to execute and deliver a significant events disclosure undertaking in compliance with SEC Rule 15C2-12 in such form as may be approved by bond counsel to the town, which undertaking shall be incorporated by reference in the notes for the benefit of the holders of the notes from time to time. And furthermore, that we authorize and direct the town treasurer to establish post-issuance federal tax compliance procedures and continuing disclosure procedures in such forms as the town treasurer and bond counsel deem sufficient, or if such procedures are currently in place, to review and update said procedures in order to monitor and maintain the tax exempt status of the notes and to comply with relative security laws. And further, that any certificates or documents relating to the notes, collectively the documents, may be executed in several counterparts, each of which shall be regarded as an original and all of which shall constitute one and the same document. Delivery of an executed counterpart of a signature page to a document by electronic mail in a PDF file or by other electronic transmission shall be as effective as delivery of a manually executed counterpart signature page to such document, and electronic signatures on any of the documents shall be deemed original signatures for the purposes of the documents and all matters relating thereto, having the same legal effect as original signatures. And further, that each member of the select board, the town clerk, and the town treasurer be and hereby are authorized to take any and all such actions and to execute and deliver such certificates, receipts, or other documents as may be determined by them or any of them to be necessary or convenient to carry into effect the provisions of the foregoing votes. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Any discussion? Any comments, Mr. McAuliffe?
Yeah, they're doing it differently now. They used to FedEx the bond over to get signed. But what they're going to do is put all the information together and they're going to email it over to me on Monday. So I should have it early Monday to be signed. So I just need signatures probably Monday afternoon. So I can get it back to them.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McAuliffe. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none.
Mr. Chair.
Mr.
Mr.
Denny?
Napoli, Mr. Napoli and I should have provided you with a glass of water for the reading of that very lengthy motion. But no, thank you. And I want to thank the treasurer for all his work on this.
Absolutely. The roll, Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Mr. Vice Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair,
Yes, sir.
may I just ask Jim, sorry to go off script here, but Jim, what time can I come in the morning? We need to sign that first one in the morning. What time can I come in? do that?
I get there at 7, like 7, 10 past 7.
Okay, so I might be in around 8.
Okay, I'll be there.
All right. Thanks.
Jim, could you,
Mr. Vice
Jim,
Chair.
could you stick around for the next agenda item as well?
Sure.
Thank you.
The next item is discussion and approval, anticipated use of 432 Adams Street, Milton, Massachusetts. Mr. Zulus, would you want to make some introductory comments? And we'll ask Mr. McAuliffe if he would like to make some comments on this particular item.
Well, I'm interested to hear what Jim has to say about it. I mean, the status from the board's point of view is that the environmental survey was completed. It came back with no issues. And so we're ready to proceed with closing the sale.
Mr. McAuliffe.
You know, we have the money to close on it, and we'll have to do the bonding after. I couldn't get it into this bond due to the fact that there's a couple technicalities that have to be voted on prior to bonding it. But we will do another bond, sort of a catch-all, probably in May of this year, and we can bond it at that point.
Very briefly, Mr. Chair, yes, what's in front of us tonight is a certification of the property and what it's going to be used for. The bonding agency is asking that we do this and that the Capital Improvement Committee also hear something similar at their next meeting. So this, again, as the treasurer stated, and just to back up what Mr. Zula said, all the reports have come back very positive, and it's time to proceed with the purchase and sale. It's just the funding source of it and the bonding piece of it requires a certification from this board about the use, the future use of this property.
Thank you, Mr. Dennehy, and all three of you, actually. Is there a motion, please?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair, to approve the following declaration. The town does not currently anticipate the 432 Adams Street, Milton, which is to be acquired with $890,000 of land acquisition bonds or any portion thereof will be leased, rented, managed, or otherwise exclusively committed to a third party, sold for so long as any bonds or notes are outstanding, including description of what land will be used for. And that is the.
Thank you,
include in
Mr.
it. You want to include, Mr. Vice Chair, should I include that it will be used for the new home for the East Milton Fire Station?
That would be a satisfactory augmentation from my point of view.
Okay,
Any
then I'll
comments
end
from
there.
anybody on that? Request from Mr. Wells? Seeing none. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And the roll. Any comment or questions? Mr.
Have to get
Zulus,
this done.
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes, and thank you to everyone who worked so hard on making this happen. We've been
and
it's been a long
myself.
process.
Yes, and agreed. It's great to be where we are at the present time on this very important part of our town. Item number 7, discussion, approval, amendments 4 and 5 of the contract between Context Architecture in the town of Milton for the fire station building. And we have with us this evening, Brian Walsh, Chairman of the Fire Station Building Committee. Richard, as the Select Board Liaison, Representative to the Fire Station Building Committee. did you want to say anything in the way of introduction or opening comments before we turn to Brian?
I was just about to text Brian to tell him that the previous article just passed, the previous agenda item just passed. I congratulate him. And he's the man
I
behind
heard
the
it
curve
and I'm
here.
delighted.
Very good, and I know you are. So thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I would be very happy to hear the chair of the Fire Station Building Committee, Mr. Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Mr. Wallace, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. And it's always a pleasure to come and talk to the select board in the town of Milton. So I wanted to just quickly make a couple of clarifications, but actually even before that, I want to state clearly for the town, this purchase of that St. Agatha's piece of property for the East Milton Fire Station couldn't be a better option for the town to provide all those fire safety services to East Milton. It is a tremendous location. I think the town has a debt of gratitude to St. Agatha's Parish for being willing to work with us on that. And, you know, it's a change that change is tough, but they were terrific to work with. This is a fantastic solution. I have to tell you, when I started working with the Fire Station Building Committee, we knew from the get-go that finding a replacement site was absolutely required. We could not build a 21st century fire station on location where the current East Milton station was. And it was going to be a tremendous challenge to find any property that might work. This property is terrific. So sorry for the exuberance, but it's a great day. And thanks to the board, to Mr. Wells, our liaison, who was also terrific on this. Richard and I went and we spoke to St. Agatha's. By the way, Richard and I are both alma maters of St. Agatha's School, which will be right behind the new fire station. And thank Mr. Zulis for his work through this also. And it's just terrific. So I'm delighted. Thank you. Now, in terms of the agenda item that you actually asked me to attend for, so COVID has caused the Fire Station Building Committee to change our course. We basically are going to go, what we'd like to do is to go before a town meeting, to come before the select board and go to the warrant committee to do a little deeper explanation, but I want to give you just a little top of the trees. And I hope to be in to speak with you in more detail about the change in course before the March 14th special town meeting. So briefly, our owner's project manager, Vertex, and our architect, Context, was worked with, as is standard procedure, different contractors and experienced what anyone doing a large building project since COVID started, that the prices have risen dramatically. I know that's no surprise to this board. I think there are some other projects in town that have experienced that already. So we have always planned to bid all three projects together to get more favorable pricing. Under normal times, that was the best strategy to get the best price for the town, put it out to bid with one contractor knowing they could do all three projects. Now, however, since that would extend out the project pricing for up to 4 to 6 years by the time we finished all three projects, our O&P and architect expect that if we do bid that out, the pricing will be significantly inflated as all of these contractors are going to be concerned with the volatile market and looking out that long. So after much consideration, the Fire Station Building Committee has agreed with the OPM and architect's recommendation to only build the headquarters, complete that project, and then when done, determine what's next again. And then more details and I'll provide you a lot more details when we come in to present on that topic just to the select board. But I just wanted to give you that update, Mr. Chairman and select board members. And now in terms of the amendments in front of you, this is standard procedure when we hired our architect. We do sections at a time for them to work on. Amendment 4 is really to cover our architect for the bidding process for headquarters. It's services for putting the headquarters project out to bid, get the consolidated documents, receiving comments from the project team, prospective bidders, incorporating those comments and making changes, issuing addenda, et cetera. And it's for fees for splitting up the delivery of that project as we are now only going out with the headquarters project instead of designing all 3 stations at the same time. Amendment 5 is services for construction administration for headquarters project only. Services for construction administration in the event the alternate for the interior fit out is accepted, an additional 3 months of fee. And for the geotechnical construction administration, reviewing, monitoring all of the geotechnical work at the headquarters project. So that's a brief summary of what those are. It's standard. We do a contract amendments for each phase as we go through. We had to change this with our change of course, and that's what those amendments are. I would note that we are still within the budget that we expected to spend with context architecture. So I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman, if you wanted more, that's the explanation. Be happy to entertain questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walsh. Any questions for Mr. Walsh by members of the board, please? Mr. Zulus.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So Brian, those amounts, the 95,000 for the design and then the 820,000 for the construction administration, those are consistent with the budget prior? Those are consistent with the existing budget?
Yes, they are. For what we had for the
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Mr. Wells. Mute, Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'm on mute.
That's okay.
So quick question, and I've thought about this, and thank you, Brian, and your committee's done a great job on this, and you mentioned this board saw the prices on the animal shelter that just came in, which was dramatically, and that's an understated word, higher than was anticipated. If anyone saw the story in the Ledger, Mayor Cope last week on what they're looking at the new Quincy Police Public Safety Center. Would it hurt us whether you awarded both or not, just in case maybe you got lucky? Would it still be prudent to bid both of them, but not be tied to having to award both? Like you had the option to either award just headquarters or award both, just in case you got lucky and got a bid that came in that you would want to lock in now. Would that make any sense to have 2 options, option to bid just headquarters or option to bid second as well, or both? Just a thought on that.
So yeah, when our OPM, in my previous life with PricewaterhouseCoopers, I worked a lot with office project managers. But anyway, when they first came in several meetings ago to discuss, it's a standard process where we're getting ready to create the bid documents and go out to bid. And they go and they start checking the pulse with contractors about what the pricings are for just certain items that are all going to be, included within the whole project. When they realized that they were seeing at the time some large increases, some increases that were high now, but expected to come down, and in fact did come down. But they were looking for about 20% at a minimum of a potential increase of just doing one project now. They saw it significantly more for bidding all 3, and it comes from the uncertainty that contractors would have with how long is COVID going to last, what is it going to do to the supply chain in the long time, and once they respond to the bid, they're locked in. So what would they do? They would inflate the prices. Then we, to your point, Richard, we discussed it. Well, gee, maybe we should do both, put them out and see what we get. But then you get into a situation where, you have to go through a process of not accepting bids for the larger project. And then later on, going out and drafting all new bid documents for just the 2 remaining or the next project. And that added a lot of expense to our project. So we thought it was best in the interest of the town we know we had to build headquarters first. Let's go ahead and just bid that, get that project done, and then see what the climate is in the whole construction industry, approximately 2 years from now, and make some other more well-educated opinions of what we should do next. For example, even which of the next stations we should do, or should we do both of them simultaneously? So just to give you a little taste, a lot of discussions on that, and we really think this approach is the best approach. I would tell you also, though, we took and worked well with both the fire chief and others. We took the headquarters design and we identified several items that are going to be part of the whole bid, but they're going to be bidded separately, so that if the entire cost for the headquarters just becomes outrageous, if we would have some flexibility potentially for changing some of these separate items that we could call out. And I would tell you, I think it's important for you folks as being responsible for the fire department. The chief was very comfortable with what we did in that approach.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Mr. Wells?
Thank you, Brian. Thanks very much.
This is a formidable undertaking, and the work from Mr. Walsh, of you, Mr. Clark, the other members of the committee, Mr. Wells, Mr. Zulus, is extremely appreciated by the town. So thank you. There is a motion on the table. Is anybody willing to move that motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the 4th and 5th amendments of the contract between Context Architecture and the town of Milton, and authorize the town administrator to sign on the board's behalf.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll take the roll. Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Thank you. And now we should invite back in Chair Conlon. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Doyle, and thank you to Brian Walsh, whom I don't get to see at the meetings anymore because I'm usually recused on something he's coming in for. But Arthur, on behalf of my work colleagues, I apologize you had to read such a lengthy motion, but that's the way it is in the bonding world, I guess. For the public's benefit, the reason I'm recused is because I work with bond counsel. Okay, so now we're on to item 8 on our agenda, which is a report and an update from the Equity and Justice for All Committee. Looks like we've already moved up to panelists, our 2 co-chairs, Pat Lattimore and Chris Hart. So good evening, and thank you both for coming in this evening. And I believe Ms. Collins is also going to speak to some of these items, and Mr. Dennehy as well. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could introduce the first item tonight. So I'm joined by Pat Lattimore, and I will let Karen Praval is in our attendees room. I'll promote Karen to a panelist as well. So for the better half of the last 2 months, myself, Ms. Lattimore and Ms. Praval have met with multiple consultants in the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion realm with the prospects of coming up with a consultant who could take a deep dive look into the town of Milton. It was enlightening in the process, and we talked about it a lot with both of the groups. So we had at our previous meeting, I presented with Ms. Lattimore how we had come down with 2 finalists. So we sat with JP Enterprises on Thursday, the 13th of January, and we sat with KL Scott Associates. It was unanimous that KL Scott Associates should be the consultant that we go forward with. But I will say it was very tough. Each of the groups provided a lot of good information and framework that I think will be very helpful as we kick this off and take a look at where the town sits. But as I worked through it, I started thinking that, on a day-to-day basis on the town side, we actually have more volunteers in town than we have employees, right? We have a multitude of volunteer committees, and we have appointed officials and elected officials. So we wanted to encapsulate that and make sure that this consultant would be able to capture all of the information currently in the system, both from a board and committee policy to HR perspective, and how we currently hire people, promote people, interview people, advertise as such. So in the process of this, it was enlightening to me, having sat with the town and for the town for the past 5+ years, that there's a lot more than just the people who punch the clock 9 to 5 every day, or put on a police uniform. There's all the volunteers that set some of the policies in town and execute some of the things that we do operationally on a day-to-day basis. So it was unanimous. Again, spent the better half of 3 hours with each of the 2 finalists. It was unanimous. I think what set KL Scott ahead of JP Enterprises for me was the fact that they've got an abundance of municipal, both city and county experience. Their team that they put together has over 90 years of experience between Keith Scott, John Reed, who'll be the program manager, working directly with me, and Tanya Morris, who has a distinct HR perspective on this. So I don't know if Pat, if you want to discuss it any further, if anything I missed, or Karen, anything you'd like to add. But I was very enthused by both of the finalists, but I think KL Scott is the one with municipal experience that could really benefit us.
No, I would agree with Mike about the 2 consultants. They were both excellent. And KLSA was the one because of its municipal experience. And also KLSA also gave us a very detailed timeline. They could start as early as, assuming that you approve give us the go ahead to go forward, they can start in the middle of February, and their process will take about 12 weeks, 12 to 14 weeks. And so I hope tonight that you can okay us to move forward with this.
Okay.
And I'm just wondering if Karen had anything to add. Thank you, Pat. It's been really good working with Pat on this. I've learned so much already. I think we received 9 proposals the second time around, and each one brought something unique, and there were some consistent themes as well. So thank you, Pat. Karen, anything that you'd like to add?
I'd have to say that just from the experience that I've had working on several diversity, equity, inclusion committees and steering committees while working with the city of Cambridge, I feel like this vendor was really bringing and providing the type of training and excuse me for a minute.
Why don't we come back to Ms. Preval? Mr. Hart, did you have anything that you wanted to add? Or Ms. Collins?
I think it's all been said.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Wells.
do we have a motion we want to make? I take it on this first item right here. Am I correct, Mike?
Well,
Or am I wrong?
Yeah, well, we have, it's on the agenda as an update from the committee, and the first line is the consultant. So I think we should ask Mr. Dennehy and Ms. Preval when she returns to speak to the funding. They both have a proposal to make to us for how we're going to pay for that. And it's not technically on for a vote this evening. I think what we could do is have a consensus of the board. We could have a formal vote at a later date, probably on the 9th, but I think for purposes of giving them the green light to get started on this project and bring the consultant in and get the contract started, I think we could probably get the sense of the board as to whether we want to move in that direction and then just make the vote official at the next meeting.
I'm fine with that because to Pat's concerns, February 1st is Tuesday.
Yes.
So I know I see, that's why I brought up, I see it's not on for approval, but if we can get this engine started. Maybe we can't put the truck again. If we get it started and put it in the right direction tonight, that would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr.
Madam Chair,
Denny,
yeah.
Mr. Denny and Mr. Doyle and I talked about that earlier in going over the agenda, and we thought we could at least get this, essentially what you said, get the process started this evening and take the formal vote later. Ms. Praval has her hand raised. So Karen, do you want to?
Yes,
Continue.
thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to talk about the finances. So we do have, although we don't have money appropriated specifically for this, we do have available funds in the Information Technology Department due to a vacancy that we could use to cover the cost of this vendor coming in to do this analysis.
And I think the way we would handle that procedurally would be probably through the end of the year, a transfer at the end of the year. But in the meantime, we know we have the funds available, and we could make use of that so-called 3% rule. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Actually, it may not even have to be at the end of the year now. Did that change because of the Municipal Modernization Act?
No, usually we can do transfers at the end of the year as long as they don't go over the appropriation from different statutory categories and departments. But that is a journal entry that's done at the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. Okay, I think I saw a hand. Was that you, Mr. Denny?
Yes, yeah, and I really appreciate the consensus this evening. Mike Kelly KLS Associates reached out to Mike Kelly knowing that it was on tonight's agenda. They're really anxious to get started. I would love to be able to deliver that message through Mike Kelly tomorrow, or personally myself to Mr. Reed or Ms. Morris or Mr. Scott, that we've got the go-ahead and they can get themselves ready and we can get all the paperwork ready for mid-February launch. And I believe it's 9 to 12 weeks to completion. So I would thoroughly appreciate and love to get the ball rolling tomorrow.
Okay, does any member of the board have a question or a comment regarding the consultant or the funding or anything? Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I agree. There was, every proposal had something, but this was really on spot, I think, for our needs. And I really appreciate what Mr. Dennehy was saying about the fact that we have so many volunteers, more than we do staff, and that so all of us volunteers, whether elected or appointed, can benefit from this as well, and therefore our residents can benefit. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone, Mr. Dennehy and the committee, for working on this. And I would say, just to get the consensus ball rolling, that I'm on board with this.
Okay, thank you. I saw Ms. Praval's hand raised.
Madam Chair, one thing I just wanted to make note that, for FY22, we have available funds to cover this part of the first stage of this work, but it's something we probably want to look into because it's ongoing. It's not as somebody comes and does training and they leave. So this is something that we probably would want to consider as we move forward with making sure there's enough money within the budget to continue this over, FY23 and 24.
Okay, and to that point, it might make sense for a line item in the select board budget to be included for this. There may be a more appropriate spot, and if there is, please let us know. But off the top of my head, I think that's probably the right area to consider as a starting point.
You're correct, Madam Chair, because we have $5,000 in a line item in the select board's office under diversity committee.
Okay.
So that's, I think, would be a good place to put it.
Okay, do we have other questions or comments? Mr. Zulus.
Madam Chair, one question and one comment. First, the question, can someone, perhaps Karen or Mike, remind me of what the bid was, what the amount is of the winning contract?
It's around $50,000 for the initial evaluation. So they'll do a whole climate study. They will, just be able to provide us what type of training and what the needs, looking at best practices references, in terms of what we're doing, mission statements. So that's all part of the initial evaluation. It's around 50,000.
Thank you, Karen. And the comment is, this is a big deal. And it is an important step for the town. Those in the private sector who are doing these kinds of examinations are going to be better corporate citizens, we hope, in the present and in the future. And municipalities that are doing these kinds of examinations are going to better serve the residents and going to be better actors. And so this is important, and I appreciate all the work that's been done in ferreting out the best consultant, and I'm looking forward to the efforts over the next 3 months.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zulus. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Wells. Mr. Wells, you're muted.
Well, buttons then. Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is this is just the town side, Mike Dennehy? This consultant is just going to be on the town side? Are we incorporating the schools in this? Where are we on this?
No, just the town side, right? A deep dive into boards, committees, our HR policy, work with all the department heads. Just a brief synopsis of their summary is there's a facilitated kickoff meeting. They'll come up with an assessment report, take a look at some gap and benchmark analysis. And then the last piece of this first step is a recommendations report. And then as Pat and Karen, with her experience, having done this in other municipalities, make sure that we have a framework and a roadmap to continue with training or whatever might be the next necessary step.
And just to clarify that point, the town side, we just mean all non-school departments. So Parks Department, Cemetery, the library, all the departments that are under the independent boards for the general public's benefit would also be covered through this consultant's work. Okay, I thought I saw another hand raised. Was there someone else with a comment or a question? Okay, well, seeing none, so we should get a sense of what the board is. Ms. Collins has indicated her support. I believe Mr. Zulus has as well. He said that this is a very important project for the town. I agree with that and would support moving forward with the consultant and using the proposed funding. Thank you to Mr. Dennehy and Ms. Preval for coming up with a funding source for us. That was a question as to how we were going to pay for this other than going to the reserve fund. So I think identifying the salary for the vacant position is a good approach here. So is it the sense of Mr. Doyle?
I just wholeheartedly concur, Madam Chair.
All right, well then I think everyone has raised voice support for going forward, and why don't we put this on the February 9th agenda just for an official vote? I think what we'd want to do is to approve the funding, approve the entry and the retention of the consultant. I'm assuming there's a contract. I haven't seen one, maybe in the process of being developed. Has it been reviewed by town council, or where are we at?
Yeah, it has. Mike Kelly will cross his T's and dot his I's tomorrow morning.
Okay.
I'll have this back to the board for a formal vote, but they'll begin to execute it tomorrow morning.
Okay, so we have a consensus of the board then to move forward with the funding and with the hiring of KL Scott Associates, and to then to authorize the town administrator on the 9th to sign the contract. Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Never mind that you just tied up the last detail I had a question.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you then. So, Mr. Dennehy, you'll make arrangements to move the ball forward on hiring the consultant. The next two items with the committee are introduction of a DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion policy, and a discussion of creation of a standing committee. And I don't know whether it's Pat or Chris or Melinda who's going to lead this discussion.
At this point, we're going to have Chris will lead the discussion on the DEI policy, and I will talk about the standing committee after he's done.
Okay. Mr. Hart.
I guess that's my cue. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Pat. So in September, we came to you with an outline of a townwide DE&I policy that was a follow-on from preliminary recommendations we provided in the spring, which this board approved the beginning of a draft, which in conjunction with Melinda, Mike Zulus, Mike Dennehy, I've been in the process of drafting. I provided a draft to Melinda, Mike, and Mike in December. I'm happy to discuss what the policy contains, but essentially fleshes out the outline that you approved in September. And the high points of that outline are a townwide statement, the requirement of training, which we've just talked about with regard to the consultant, fleshing out of a complaints policy regarding DE&I in the town, recruitment, hiring, retention, promotion for purposes of diversity and inclusion on a townwide basis. So there are several details in the policy that I'm hopeful that the board will be able to review, provide comment on to our committee, so that we can respond, answer questions, flesh out of the details. Obviously, one of the things that I'm particularly concerned about is making sure that whatever's in the policy is feasible and makes sense for those who are going to be responsible and accountable for carrying out the what the policy calls for. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions regarding what's in the policy, though I know you haven't read it. To whatever extent it's useful, I'm happy to talk in further detail.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Let me ask if any, Ms. Collins has her hand raised, and then if any member of the board has any questions or comments. Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Hart. I just wanted to mention that the Equity and Justice for All Advisory Committee, of course, is time bounded, and they'll be delivering their report soon. And these are both the DI policy and the standing committee will be part of that report. But the thought was, at which I really appreciated the committee pointing out that it would be good to get a running start on some of these things so that there are some foundational pieces to move ahead with the rest of the recommendations in the report. And so these two, I think, are particularly important. And we could, well, I don't know that town council has taken a look at it, but the board will get the policy and then we can review it and get back to them. And I don't know whether we'd like to do it through the policy committee first, or if the board would just like to look at it. So that's something for us to discuss and decide. And I'll just leave it at that for the moment.
Okay, does anyone have any thoughts on that point? Or questions or comments for Mr. Hart? Mr. Zulus.
So I think it's important to have a timeline for the review, and my thought would be that we have the policy committee and this board look at it in parallel. In other words, publish it to the board, publish it to the policy committee. The policy committee, which we haven't been so good about meeting this year, but we'll do it. And can we create an expectation to have a discussion of the policy in substance? I don't know if our next meeting is too soon, February 9th, or maybe the meeting after that. But if it's the next meeting, then the policy committee will meet before that. But I'd like to kind of put a short leash on this if we can, and make sure we talk about this within the next meeting or two. That's my thought.
Okay, Ms. Collins and then Ms. Lattimore.
Well, maybe Ms. Lattimore would rather go first, but we did sort of sketch out a little timeline, but let's see what Ms. Lattimore has to say first.
Yeah. So Mike, thank you for talking about getting this launched and reviewed as soon as possible. What the committee has discussed is that they, both the two items that we have, we would like to have the town have some level of continuity because our committee actually technically sunsets on March 21st. And so if we could get the policy in place, as well as this next item that we'll talk about in terms of a more standing permanent committee, then we think that the implementation of what some of our recommendations will be easier for the select board. And so we definitely think that having starting the review before the committee ends would be helpful.
Okay, so to that point, Mr. Zulus has suggested February 9th, and asked whether that's too soon. Does anyone on the board have any concerns about the 9th? Or should we just go ahead and put it on that agenda? And Ms. Collins, did you want to add anything further to this?
Well, I wanted to just ask Mr. Hart if that is comfortable. Originally, we had a slightly different timeline, so
Okay.
it's fine with me. But
to answer the question, and actually, Ms. Collins, you anticipated a comment I was going to make, which is I'm happy to make myself available to the policy committee and the board with regard to revisions, questions at any point, and as quickly as needed. So that timeline is fine by me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, so my point would be, Mr. Zulus is correct. I mean, the policy committee hasn't really done a lot this year. I think we get it to the full board, let the board look at it, and then set a date to vote, put in place. I think we all know what we need. I think we have an idea, even though I haven't read it, I do have a pretty good idea of some of the things that will be in it. I think getting it done is probably the most important thing for us to do right now. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about it. I'd rather get it, review it, and vote it.
Okay, so I know the policy committee in the past has wanted us to have a first reading and second reading before we adopt a policy. Now, we did have, as has already been pointed out, we had some discussion back in the early fall, September, I believe, regarding this. We had some of the members of the board have not yet seen the latest draft, so I'm not sure how much is changed. But do we want to consider the 9th the first reading, or consider the second reading, since we've already had a discussion on this? I guess to those who are more familiar with it, let's get their guidance. Mr. Zulus.
Madam Chair, I think if we had a first reading, if you will, on the 9th with comments, perhaps there'll be comments for Chris to go back, and then if we have a second reading and approval in a subsequent meeting, I think that probably, my guess is that works in the timeline. So we'd have a first reading on the 9th, and maybe I don't know what our current schedule is, but
the 23rd.
2 weeks from the 9th, the 23rd, then we have a second reading and approval on the 23rd. That may work.
Okay, that sounds reasonable to me. Mr. Wells.
I concur. I can live with that schedule. I think that would work.
Okay, if everyone's in agreement on that, then why don't we plan to put this on for both the 9th for the first reading and the 23rd for the second reading? Okay, great.
And could we have possible approval on the 23rd, Madam Chair, on the second reading? Could we have the second and then possible? Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, and then back to my agenda. So then the discussion of the standing committee was the third item.
So as Ms. Collins has mentioned, the committee is in the process of completing its final report. We hope we will have that report to you most likely around about March 13th. But in advance of that, the committee felt two important items. The first you just addressed, which was the policy. The second that has come up is what happens after we leave and who is staying on point for DEI with the town. And we know that this is a very, it's hard because there's so many people who are owning pieces of it, but nobody's looking holistically at it. What the committee did is that we did look across a number of towns, and we found that a best practice was that to have a permanent standing committee. And there's a number of towns that, and I'll just name a few of them, that do: Sharon, Westford, Chelmsford, Arlington, Brookline, Danvers, Sudbury, Wellesley, and I could go on and on because there's a number of towns in the last year have put together a standing committee. So what we would like to do is ask you to launch a process to create a standing committee. And it does, when we say create a standing committee, we're not saying that we have to have the committee in place by the time that we leave, but that you will have voted to approve a committee and to have that in place. And so I'm not sure what your process is to do that, because I know that the last time when Mr. Zulus brought forth the current committee, that, you know, it took a few months, and then of course you have to recruit the folks, the members of that committee. So I'd ask you to consider putting on your agenda a vote to approve a permanent committee with the same, basically the same charter that we currently have.
Okay, I think if this charter is going to be the same, that makes it easier, rather than having to go through a few drafts of what the charge would be. And any comments or questions from members of the board? Mr. Wells.
I'm fine with that, Madam Chair. I expect at some point this committee would make a recommendation similar to this. And what you just commented, I agree. The fact that the charge is pretty much the same really makes the procedure for us to do this much easier and something we could streamline.
Thank you, Mr.
So,
Doyle.
Mr. Wells.
Yes, Ms. Lattimore.
I was just going to respond to Mr. Wells.
Your screen just froze up, Pat. We just lost you. Okay.
Back?
What? You're back. Yes, we can hear you now, but we lost what you were saying, Ms. Lattimore. Your screen froze up.
Oh, sorry about that. I was just saying that I did get a chance to look at a number of the other other towns and their charter, and their charters are very similar to ours. And in fact, I think that we have been a leader in helping other towns to figure out a charter, because almost to some extent they read verbatim. So.
Okay. I guess the question would be, do we want the same number of members, or do we think there's a reason to have a different size committee? Does the committee have a position on that?
I don't have a position, but one of the things that I did think, the size of this committee has been somewhat optimal because it is not too many people to bring together, but it does create a good diversity of opinion. So I'll let Chris answer also.
I agree with Pat, and I would also add that it was the right size as well, because as commitments came up over the year and a couple of people had to drop off, there were still enough members of the committee to make it productive.
Okay, and I realize I jumped ahead of Mr. Doyle with that. So Mr. Doyle, you had a comment or a question?
Not a problem, Madam Chair. Merely wanted to support Mr. Wells' comment. To that effect, 2 points. One, imagine if we had this committee 10 years ago, and then considering how our society is going to evolve in the future, this would give us a vision and a mechanism to be prepared and to serve everybody equitably.
Okay, thank you. Any other, Mr. Zulus?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it would help if the committee can do it to make a recommendation on the charge and the membership rather than an informal suggestion. If the committee has it within its wherewithal to make that specific recommendation, having reviewed other charges, to say this is what we think the charge should be, and this is what we think the membership should be. If you can do it, that'll help frame our discussion, I think, and I think it'll move things faster if you can do that.
You're on mute, Ms. Lattimore.
Yeah, we can do that, Mr. Zulus.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
yes.
just one final point. Where there is a sunset on this, for the co-chairs, could we set this like April 1st for us to be able to vote this and put it in a place? Would that be, is that too long, or is that too fast a timeline? I just don't want to see a hiatus here. Like July, we're talking about this. It's not
I was
done.
actually hoping we might be able to do it sooner than that because if the charge is essentially the same, we're not really changing the size of the committee. There may be some members who even want to stay on, and maybe you could survey some of the existing members to see if some, or all maybe, but at least some might be interested in staying on. Hopefully we might even be able to do this one of the February meetings, depending on when the committee meets next and
I'm
how
fine with
formal they
that.
want to make the recommendation.
I'm fine with that. I just wanted to give them a little bit of breathing room, so like they don't have to start doing it tonight.
I think that we are comfortable doing it in advance of your February meeting. So whichever works for you in terms of your calendar, we could do the 9th or the following meeting, whichever works best.
All right, so I think either the 9th or the 23rd, if we're going to have the first reading and the second reading on the 23rd, we'll have this committee update on the agenda both nights. So we could do it at either of those meetings, whatever is more convenient for the committee.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Zulus.
And in terms of membership, there was no shortage of interest for people to serve on this committee back in, I guess it was August of 2020. So I hope and expect that will be the same if we have a standing.
All right, is there anything else for discussion this evening? Then thank you very much for the report and for these helpful suggestions, and we've got some next steps outlined. So it's been a good discussion. Thank you both for joining us this evening and for all of your work and the committee's work.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you,
Have a
Madam
good
Chair.
night.
Bye.
Thank you. Okay, number 9 is COVID-19 update, and I don't think we have much to report on this. Mr. Dennehy, is there anything that you wanted to add? We don't have any new testing dates scheduled at this time. Is there anything you wanted to report, Mr. Dennehy?
No, we don't. Just I know the health department had put out a note through social media and on the town's website about antigen tests that are available to all residents. And I want to thank the board for funding antigen tests that we will keep on hand for town employees. But that's all I have to update tonight, which I'm quite thankful for. First
Okay.
time in a while.
Good news is that according to the news, the numbers seem to be going in the right direction now and decreasing, which is a much better place to be in than what we were in a few weeks ago. Okay, if no one on the board has anything else for number 9, why don't we move on to 10, which is the solid waste contract extension, and I'll ask Mr. Dennehy to give an update to the board. We all have a draft of a first amendment before us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I brought this a couple of weeks ago. It wasn't quite ready, so we have very quickly that this would be an extension of the contract with Boston Carting Services, who's doing business as Sunrise Scavenger. It's the green trucks, white trucks, red trucks that is collecting solid waste and recycling material and yard waste from our community. The term of this contract would extend. The current contract is set to expire on June 30th of this year. This would extend the contract for 5 years, from July 1st, 2022 to June 30th of 2027. The one caveat is the cost of living increase in the contract, or escalation factor, whatever you'd prefer to call it. As we've all seen, we talked about it this evening. Mr. Walsh talked about it. Mr. Wells hinted about it. We've seen some pretty extraordinary numbers due to inflation and supply chain issues, and basically what's been called upon because of the pandemic. So myself and the deputy director are very, very pleased to announce that there would be a 5-year extension on this contract. 1.5% increase for FY23, 2% increase for FY24, 2.5% increase for FY25, a 3% increase for FY26, and a 3.5% increase for FY27. So if you take that collectively, that's a 12.5% increase over 5 years, which is an average of 2.5%. I hope you would agree that a 2.5% average in this inflating economy is something that we should be willing to commit to. Our partner, Boston Carting Services, has done so, and I'm just waiting for approval from this board tonight to move forward with this contract extension for the hauler of our solid waste, recycling, and yard waste material.
Thank you, Mr. Dennehy. Does any member of the board have a comment or a question? Mr. Zulus.
So at the risk of getting too far into the weeds, on this, the last sentence of section 3 talks about the increases. And it says, in relation to the fixed collection fees and disposal rate paid by Milton under the contract for FY22, the fixed collection fees and disposal rate shall increase as follows: 1.5% for FY23. So it's clear we're going up 1.5% in FY23, and then it's 2% FY24. I think that means 2% above FY22. And I think that's what it means. It might be a little bit more clear, because I don't want there to be any kind of miscommunication and that it's 2% above FY23. So I guess that's the question: is the increase always is the base year FY22, and these increases, for example, the FY26, that's 3% over FY22, or is that 3% over the increased rates for FY25? If I'm being clear.
You are being clear. It's my understanding that those are annual escalation rates. In other words, FY23 will be 1.5% higher than 22, 24 will be 2% higher than 23, et cetera.
Okay, but now I appreciate that. I could read that sentence I could read that sentence such that it's 2% in FY24 over FY22, because it says in relation to the rates paid for the contract for FY22. So if it's what you described, Mike, we might want to clarify it just so there's no misunderstanding. Because when I first read it, I thought, okay, we're just going up in FY25 2.5% over FY22. That's the base year. But if it's not that, if it's we're going up in relation to the prior year, we might want to work with the language a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. No. Point well taken, and I will ask town council to clarify that language. Yeah, it is intended to read as an annual escalation factor, so that on July 1st of 2022, it'll be 1.5% higher than June 30th of 2022, and in July 1st of 2023, it will be 2% higher than June 30th of 2023, and so on.
Okay.
And if I'm misreading it, that's fine. So I just might want to run it by.
No, it's a good point that you raised, Mr. Zulus, and it may be that the introductory language is not worded as well as it should be. My understanding of the intent was what Mr. Dennehy said, but you raised a good point. Ms. Collins.
Well, I had a similar question, and so I checked the math, and that is what you're saying, Mr. Zulus, is exactly what the schedule has. So I didn't think about the fact about the language not being clear. I just thought maybe I didn't understand it at first. But the numbers do bear out. So what you said.
Are you looking at Exhibit A, Ms. Collins? Is that what you're basing your comment on?
Yeah, actually, even if you go down to like number 4, yeah, but it ties out all of it.
Well, number 4 is the performance bonds.
But they escalate at the same amount, I think. But anyway, all I was saying was thank you for pointing that out, because I thought it was me, and but it isn't clear.
I will make sure that is clear. Yeah.
All right. Why don't we get clarification on this then? A good question has been raised, and why don't we put this on for the 9th?
Yeah, and again, this is June 30th. We need to make sure this is ticked and tied. A lot of the contracts years ago, and I only say this because I've been doing it for a while, a lot of them were tied to the consumer price index, right? And there was an escalation factor not to exceed 5%, but all tied to the consumer price index. We will clarify this so that it's easier to read and follow. But I'll just go back to the fact that 2.5% on average over the next 5 years is a very good contract for both sides. So I appreciate the input, and I'll bring it back to you on the 9th.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Let's go on to item 11, which is a report from the Finance Committee on the American Rescue Plan Act funding. Mr. Zulus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do not, the Finance Committee doesn't have any additional recommendations. We're taking, requested some additional information from the Cemetery Department and the Police Department on their requests, and we're still working on the business grant application process. I expect we'll have something for you on February 9th, but nothing tonight.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Item 12 is a preliminary, and this is meant to be a high-level initial discussion of the FY23 departmental budget requests. And I'll ask Mr. Dennehy if he'd like to speak to this to get us started. It is 8:26, so we do have several more items on the agenda, and we have a Governor Stoughton meeting after this, so if everyone could keep that in mind. Mr. Dennehy, would you like to give an update for the board?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. So the governor's budget came out today, back of the envelope, quick math this afternoon after I saw it. I believe the town of Milton will be getting a net a little over $1 million in state and state and local aid, which is great news for us. We'll talk more about this at a later date, and we're going to. Finance Director Praval unfortunately had to leave the meeting tonight, so that's very good news, and that came out late this afternoon after the governor spoke. Obviously, it's his last budget. We're looking obviously for a little bit more money for Chapter 90 for our roadway repairs, but we'll see about that. But the very good news coming out today out of the State House is the $1 million net gain in our cherry reports, which is net of our Chapter 70 and unrestricted general government aid and our assessments. So that's very good news. Myself and the Finance Director will be joining Chief Madden, Director Stanton, Director Ritchie, and members of the library trustees and Director Adamczyk Monday night at the Warrant Committee as we start that process with them. I do have a little bit to share tonight. Finance Director Praval has been working through the budgets with each of the department. She's putting binders together, which will be available to all of the board members. What she did tonight, though, is she put together a little sheet showing some of our public safety departments. I don't know if you can see this or if you want me to make it a little bigger, but and then just going from left to right, so you see the department basic description of salary and wages and general expenses for police and fire. There's an overtime line in there. And then what she's doing is she's going to take last year's appropriation and take this year's budget requests. She has a special column called FY23 supplemental requests. What this is, and it will be clarified on the next page, is it's essentially things that are being asked for by the department head above and beyond their contractual obligations or collective bargaining agreements. In the case of the Inspectional Services Department, Mr. Prondak and his staff are inundated. The housing boom and repairs in Milton have not stagnated at all, and instead they continue to increase. So very quickly, he's looking for a part-time local inspector, a plumbing and sealer, weights and measures part-time employee, and then we just need some office help with the 40Bs looming and all the permits that are flying out of that office. Very quickly again, and this is 30,000-foot views. All of these department heads are going to come in and present formally, but this next one with the police department is kind of a product of supply chain and what we're seeing in the global economy. So a couple of years ago, they used to buy 4 cruisers with $120,000 Nowadays, you can only get one cruiser for $40,000. So that line item was cut last year as a part of our reduction to balance the budget. The chief's asking for another $40,000 back to purchase another cruiser. Before I get to fire, there is one other thing, and Member Wells can speak to this as well if he'd like. The chief presented to the Capital Improvement Committee $162,500 request for body cameras for the police department. That includes all the equipment and storage material from an IT perspective. If that should not qualify for a capital improvement item, we're trying to qualify it or qualify whether it qualifies depending on the useful life. That will be something that may have to be supplemented to this $40,000 request. So you could see the police department supplemental budget increase that 162.5. And then very quickly, you look at the fire department. He's added in his 2% increase. We're putting 2% for set aside as we've started negotiations with a couple of the 7 unions on the town side. He's asking for an additional $100,000 to cover contractual time off, vacation, and Juneteenth. I think the Juneteenth holiday is approximately $35,000 of overtime to staff that. The chief has asked that a lieutenant be added with fire prevention and training. This position was approved before I got here in FY16, but currently we've got Mr. Mataliano doing yeoman's work throughout the town. And with all the 40Bs looming and some of the development projects going on, that work's just going to get a little bit busier. So there's a couple other things they have here, some smaller items to well, I don't want to, discount the dollar amount, but $20,000 to update some equipment, very necessary equipment at the fire department. So if you allow me just to scroll back into the line, what the director has done, Director Praval has done is come up with that total item. And if you move across the column and you add in these supplemental requests, you'll see the percentage of change. One thing to note is, the increase in the overtime that the fire department has requested to bring them back to where they were 2 fiscal years ago. Inspectional services, that salary and wages line is higher because Joe is requesting $91,000 in employees to help queue some of the work quell some of the work that's in the queue. So at the end of the day, it's a 3% increase. I think it's safe to say you could add a dollar, a small percentage into that because we're going to put the salary and wages set aside into its own separate town meeting article. But this is where we started. This is what the binders are going to look like when you see them. Each of the presentations by the department heads on Monday night will be as detailed as the warrant committee or the select board would like them in the future. But this is what it's going to look like. And I thoroughly appreciate this supplemental budget page that Director Praval has instituted. It provides that narrative that the select board and the warrant committee and oftentimes the town meeting members look for. So I know that's a 30,000-foot view and very more to come. We plan on being at the warrant committee 2 to 3 times a week for the next month or so. With that,
All right, thank you, Mr. Denny. If you could just scroll back up to the first page, I just happened to notice something while you were showing these screens. You see there where it says police and youth?
Yes.
At this stage, I think we should just take and youth out wherever it shows up in forms of budgets or spreadsheets or anything. A lot of people know that at one time the town did have a standing youth department. And, due to some retirements, eventually we had one person and that became a part-time role. And a former Board of Selectmen moved that youth department into the police. Really, Richard could probably speak better to, but it was really just to house it somewhere. And then when Vicki McCarthy, who was the last youth director, retired, we really haven't been able to replace that position. And the position, it probably still exists on the personnel board schedule, but it has not been filled in a very long time. So I suggest we take that out because usually every year somebody on the warrant committee asks why that position, why the department is called police and youth. And it just doesn't seem to make sense to carry and youth forward anymore, which reminds me, we have the youth task force and we had someone working at the Wildcat Den, but we can that's not on our agenda for tonight. At some point, we can probably get an update on where things stand there, but small point, but I think we should try to correct that where it's going to show up in a lot of different places because it just carries forward. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good high level update on some of our public safety departments. Does anyone on the board have any questions or comments at this stage? Knowing we're going to have many more opportunities in the finance committee, we'll be looking at the budget going forward. Any comments or questions? Mr. Wells?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I concur 100%. I thought we had already done this a long time ago. So point well taken to removing the youth on that.
Yeah, I think it's been removed in some places and just carries forward elsewhere.
And just on the supplemental requests, Mr. Den, he's correct. The camera, my gut is the camera is going to wind back up in its operating budget. I don't think it's going to meet the threshold for capital, but Karen's still vetting it out now, but just my gut is that will be going back there. No, I mean, we've got department heads speaking as a former department. There's an exercise we've had to go through in the past, and I think it will work for us again this year.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Then seeing none, Mr. Dennehy, thank you very much. And please thank Ms. Praval for us.
She apologizes. She's taken ill this evening, so.
Okay, well, we hope she
A
feels
lot
better.
of good work being done by Director of Finance and our team. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I've managed to misplace the agenda. Here we are. Okay, item 13. We have acceptance of a pilot payment from Milton Academy. Now, the agenda does read $200,000, which is what Milton Academy is contributing to the general fund. We should note that they have also donated $12,500 to each of the police and fire departments, $7,500 for the teen center that we just mentioned, $4,000 to the library. So the total pilot payment is actually $236,500. 200 of that is to the town general fund, and that's a pretty substantial increase over what was paid to the general fund in 2021, fiscal 2021, which was $162,500. So I believe the increase is 23% overall, and a very generous and sizable increase in the pilot payment from Milton Academy. They've given us numbers going back over the past 4 years, showing that their total contribution has increased from $140,000 in FY 2019 to $236,500 in FY 22. And I also would like to report out to the board that Todd Bland, the head of Milton Academy, had asked me a few weeks ago to meet with him. We finally set up a Zoom yesterday, and he was looking to let us know that he's going to be stepping down. It's already public news and he's already been communicated to the Milton Academy community, but he's going to be stepping down at the end of the next school year. And the process for his successor to be chosen will be starting sometime soon. July 1st of 2023 would be when his successor starts. And he told me that he wants to be sure that he and his successor continue to have a working relationship with the town and specifically the board. And we agreed that I would put him in touch with Mr. Doyle, who's the vice chair, because I'll be stepping down in April and new members will be coming onto the board. There'll be a new election of officers. So he's looking forward to continuing the dialogue and reaching out to Mr. Doyle and Mr. Dennehy and having hoping that his successor will continue to have a good working relationship with the town. So I told him I would report that out at our meeting this evening. So does anyone have any comments on the pilot payment, or would anyone like to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the pilot payment in the amount of $200,000 plus whatever you added there. I just have to vote the 200.
Yeah, let's do 200 because that's what's on the agenda for the general fund.
Okay, so payment in the amount of $200,000 from Milton Academy to the town of Milton.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Second.
Mr. Zulus.
Just a quick comment, Madam Chair. Just to point out, as you alluded to, the Milton Academy payment has increased in just under 3 years, nearly $100,000, and certainly our gratitude for increasing that amount. And I think it's important to acknowledge the efforts of members of the pilot committee going back over the last several years, including David Burns, including Tony Farrington, and including Matt Keswick, who worked very hard going back 3 or 4 years ago, and you know, we've seen some of the fruits of those efforts here, I think.
Yes, I'm glad you pointed that out. Thank you. That is important. And all of including yourself, all of the committee, and Mr. Dennehy also is a member of that committee, and members of the Board of Assessors over the years. So thank you to the committee for their good work. And I did convey our thanks to Milton Academy for the substantial increase in their pilot contribution. Okay, so the motion has been made and seconded. Do we have any discussion? If not, all in favor? Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes. One
And
point, just a, go ahead, Madam Chair, vote first.
And myself, yes. Mr. Wells?
So just a point, maybe we put a place mark in it, and I'd like to do this before April for Ms. Collins' depart, if we could send a letter of thanks and congratulations to head of school Todd Bland for his partnership during his time here. Congratulate him and wish him well going forward. That'd be appropriate.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. And I think we do normally send a thank you letter when the institutions make a pilot payment, but I thought it's a good idea, and I think we should probably add to the one that we sent to Milton Academy to acknowledge Mr. Bland's partnership with the town and his next steps, and his thank him for his outreach to the town, also to continue the dialogue and ensure that the relationship continues and on a positive note and moves forward. So good suggestion. Why don't we work on that, and we'll have everyone sign it. We'll get it over to Milton Academy.
Seems
Okay,
like yesterday I was meeting him for the first time.
Yeah, I think it's been 14 years since he's been in that capacity as the head of school. Number 14, we do not have Mr. Zawinski this evening, but he has asked that we take a look at and potentially approve an application for a technical assistance program grant from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. This would be for a parking management plan for the East Milton Business District. Is there anything you want to add, Mr. Dennehy? We do have a copy of the grant application and a memo from Mr. Zawinski, who is at a 40B hearing tonight, so that's why he's not able to join us.
No, that's great, Madam Chair. I think you summed it up. There's been a lot of work and done. For those of you that remember, a parking management plan was one of the top priority recommendations from the local rapid recovery plan for East Milton Square that was produced by Beta a little over a year ago. So this would follow up on that. I want to thank the town planner and assistant town planner, Allison Quinn. They've got lots of irons in the fire, including all the 40B work that they're doing. So yeah, so I would ask that the select board authorize me to sign a project proposal for this year's round of technical assistance program from MAPC.
Okay, so we have a proposed motion, or are there any questions?
Madam Chair, I would move to approve the Technical Assistance Program grant application from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council for a parking management plan for the East Milton Business District.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
And Ms. Conlon, yes. Okay, item 15, we're going to vote on A and C. The Conservation Commission is 15B, and I'll ask that the board defer that to a future meeting so that the Conservation Commission can review an additional application that was received. So the first one is the Master Plan Implementation Committee.
Madam Chair.
Oh, go ahead, Arthur. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Richard.
I'll make a motion to approve our neighbor, Arthur Elaine Benson, for one-year term on the Master Plan Implementation Committee.
Can we please to second your motion?
Any discussion? This is a joint appointment with the planning board, and I don't know if they've voted on it yet, but I know it has been reported up to them. And this was a recommendation from the committee itself, which reviewed several applications. Okay, then all in favor, Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
and myself, yes. If the board's okay with deferring item 15B, we'll move on to 15C, which is the Local Historic District Study Committee. And I believe Ms. Collins, who has worked to vet these applications, may want to speak to this committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, we got a little help from Larry Loffer, who's the chair of the Local Historic District Study Committee. He is acquainted with another architect who also is a building commissioner in a neighboring municipality, and thought this person would be a great fit, and that's Mr. McGrath. And I had gone through our applications because we were, this committee too was blessed with lots of people who wanted to get involved, and looked at applications, spoke with a few people and with Mr. Loffer, and thought that we would put Ms. Manning forward as well. And there's one additional position that's still open. It's a bit of a wrinkle though, where this one's concerned, because the committee lost its lawyer, and it is recommended that there be some kind of legal experience directly on the committee. However, I reached out to some people in the town and got the name of someone who might be a good fit, and that person just wasn't able to do it. And I've had difficulty finding, and so has Mr. Loffer, a lawyer. So I was wondering if there were some other possibilities about that would help us provide some legal expertise. The committee already has several questions that it would like answered before it starts public engagement. And you and I, Madam Chair, talked about perhaps our own legal counsel, Murphy, Hesse, Toomey, and Lehane, may be able to provide some of those answers. Also, there are organizations who are already involved in this kind of work. They may have some expertise to lend there. And we might provide a small budget if we really needed to, in order to get some specific real estate legal counsel around the historic residence. Well, it's not just residences, but historical properties.
So I guess it sounds like we're putting out a plea for any lawyers in town who may have some expertise in historic preservation or know a little bit about historic districts, or have an interest in the topic and might be interested in serving on the committee. And Ms. Collins and I talked about the fact the committee would have access to town council, so we would probably want to coordinate that with Mr. Dennehy, so he's aware that, you know, that they're consulting with town council, but that's certainly an option as well. But if there is an attorney who's interested in serving on a town committee and has an interest in the Local Historic District Study Committee, which has, there's the Milton Village, well, I think the Master Plan Implementation Committee, when we're working on the Milton Village, was very interested in moving this forward. The Planning Board, the Historical Commission, there's a lot of different interested parties in town that would like to see this committee be successful and move the idea of historic districts forward. So it should be a topic that's timely and interesting, and we hope there might be a volunteer who comes forward. So we have the two names of Tom McGrath and Harriet Manning, and thank you to Ms. Collins for going back and vetting these candidates again after we've had a few vacancies. And we have a motion. Would anyone like to make a motion to appoint these two candidates to the committee this evening?
Madam Chair, I'll move to appoint Tom McGrath and Harriet Manning to one-year terms on the Local Historic District Study Committee.
Second.
I'll second.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay, we have a second. Do we have any discussion other than thanking them for stepping up and being willing to serve?
Madam
Okay.
Chair, if I may, I'll only add that I think I'm a fine example of the fact that legal experience is way overrated. So I think we'll be fine on that board.
No, I don't think so. but hopefully someone will heed the call. All right, so all in favor of appointing Tom McGrath and Harriet Manning? Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yeah,
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
and myself, yes. And again, thank you to Ms. Collins. All right, we'll see what kind of response we get. Some viewer out there may want to volunteer or may know of a volunteer. No, we put on the agenda as items 16 and 17, the special town meeting and the annual town meeting, in case there's any updates or in case any member of the board may wish to raise any issue regarding the various articles that are being submitted for either. I have no updates on the special town meeting. I think we're just waiting to see the outcome of the planning board's public hearing on February 8th regarding the accessory dwelling units article. We know the warrant committee did take a vote to refer that article back for further study. Whether that may change or not, we will see. But I have no update on the special town meeting. Is there anything that anyone wishes to discuss? Mr. Wells?
Just one thing, unrelated to any specific item, more of a general comment. I believe you and the vice chair may be aware of this, that I was talking to Representative Driscoll today, that the legislation will be approved to hold the special town meeting via Zoom.
I had heard, the last I had heard last week, it was approved by the House and was going to the Senate. So I have not had an update since then. I haven't actually done any research on it myself or reached out. Is there, so there's an update as of today that it's has it been
Yeah,
approved
I
by the
spoke to him
Senate?
this afternoon. He didn't tell me how but he said it was done. It would be, well, it was supposed to be done.
Okay, so maybe by our next meeting, but we'll hope we'll have some kind of a indication one way or other, because we'll want to know. We'll need to include the remote notice and make sure that that's clear in the warrant if it is going to be a remote meeting. Does anyone have anything on the special town meeting other than that issue that's still open? Okay, then 17 is the annual town meeting, and I think we should leave this on the agenda as we go through the spring, but for tonight's purposes, I don't have anything to report. Does anyone have anything to discuss on the annual town meeting? Okay, hearing none. Why don't we go on to 18, which is a discussion of our priorities for this current quarter. At our last meeting, we talked about the fact that both Ms. Collins and I will be stepping down from the board at the end of April, and we'll have some transition on the board, and we want to focus on, for the months of January is almost over, February, March, and April, what are the priorities that we'd like to try to either wrap up some loose ends or move some things forward prior to the new board coming in, so that we don't have as much hanging over that could be completed before then, for the new members and for the board to take up anew. So I think we touched on a few of them last week, but Mr. Zulus had to leave the meeting early, wasn't feeling well, and we postponed this agenda item until tonight so we could have all of the members present. So I'll just mention a couple of things, and then we could maybe, anyone should feel free to chime in on what some of the things are that we want to tie up. Obviously, the East Milton Library is going back out. We've already approved the RFP. That process should be commencing this week in terms of advertising and getting the ball rolling. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to wrap that up by April. The animal shelter is a priority. We're obviously not going to get it done and built by April, but I'm hopeful that we might be able to have a solution or a strategy to move forward for the next steps. We did reject the bids at our last meeting. We've had a little bit of difficulty with town council and the council with the Animal League conferring with the architect. I understand that meeting is now scheduled for tomorrow, or it's probably not a meeting, but a phone call with the project manager. So we should have some guidance from the architect as to whether a redesign can reduce costs, but we'll know a little bit more for our meeting on the 9th. But I'm hopeful that that's something that we can make some progress on between now and the 26th of April. We also have several 40B cases pending before the Board of Appeals, and during 582 Blue Hill Avenue and the Ice House, our board did offer comments on those projects. I believe the East Milton one and the Canton Ave one are advancing towards their final stages, so the board may want to consider at our next meeting whether to offer similar comments on the need for affordable housing, as well as specific comments to the projects. And we could put that on for the 9th. Policy adoption, I think, is also important, and we talked about that with respect to the DEI policy, but I think for the general policies that the policy committee has been working on, if we're able to adopt some of them prior to April, that would be helpful, so that some of them are in place before the new board starts its work. And then under item 19, we'll get to the town administrator annual review process, but I would also like to see if we can wrap that up by hopefully late March, if that's not too ambitious. Other members of the board, topics that we want to discuss, making our priorities to get done in the next couple of months.
Hey, Madam Chair, that's a meaty platter. And if we accomplish what you've itemized during the time prescribed, I think we will have done well.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Doyle, Ms. Collins, and then Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm sure that there are other things, but the things that have risen to mind in the past week or so, or actually months. The RFP for Town Farm, which I think it was projected to go out in January. I think maybe we're looking at the beginning of February, but I'd like to make sure that that's in good shape, and that the planning department has whatever support it needs. And I've also been curious about what we can do vis-a-vis Kidder Library.
Yeah, Kidder, I think since that's been an executive session, that's probably we could put that on for a future executive session item, but I had that one on my list as well as something that we should try to move along as quickly as we can. So thank you. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I concur with Ms. Collins as well in her thoughts, but one thing I think we need to get done is the finalizing 41 Wharf. We're just waiting on a vote. We just signed a second extension that we didn't think we would have to sign. We thought this would all be done by 1/1/22. As the members all know, till there's a final vote, we can't move forward on what we need to do down there on a lot of this. So I think getting that vote taken by 88 Wharf LLC, their membership, and moving this forward is very important. We've spent an inordinate amount of time on this now.
Okay, so why don't we follow up with town council on that? He'll probably need to check in with Ned Corcoran, who represents the condo association.
I think that's a good point, and I'd really want to see this get done before you two leave.
Okay, all right, so we'll follow that one up. Anything else? Mr. Zulus.
Madam Chair, that this may happen as a matter of course, but will be dominated over the next couple of months by budget talks, and we'll have to deal with the substantive aspect of that. But I think the board would benefit by leveraging your expertise and Ms. Collins's expertise in creating a roadmap for going forward on just how we go about the budget. So the extent that while we're going through things substantively, if we just we have a sense of best practice, I think we do, but any improvements we can make in terms of schedule and timing and process, I think that'll be helpful going.
Okay, that's a good point. And I actually the reference to 41 Wharf and Mr. Corcoran made me think of the billboard and next steps there. So we should probably, I'd rather not see that wait until we have two new people have to come in fresh to deal with it. So maybe that's something we should get onto. In fact, I think we have a request from Mr. Corcoran to get that on an agenda for further discussion. So why don't we try to target that for February? Okay, so I think we have a yes, Ms. Collins.
Oh, I slightly off topic, but on topic. The animal shelter. There's a meeting tomorrow at 1. I didn't know if you saw that.
I did not. So tomorrow at 1. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Well, it sounds like we've identified some priorities, and we'll try to follow up on these and move them along over the next few weeks. Thank you, everyone. 19 is the town administrator annual review process. And the way we just did this last year, as everyone will remember, is that the immediate past chair, last year was Mr. Zulus, in this case it would be Ms. Collins, would lead this process. And there's a component involving a self-evaluation by Mr. Dennehy as the town administrator and members of the board to complete their own reviews, and then the prior chair to put together a, I guess, a composite was the word we used last year, review. So we ideally, I would like to see us try to wrap this up by the end of March, if that's not too aggressive a timeline, because it would be good to avoid this at our last meeting in April. And obviously with the new members coming on, they're not going to be in a position to contribute to the process this year. So does that timing make sense to try to get this done? Does it work for Mr. Dennehy as well as for Ms. Collins and the members to try to get this done by the end of March? If we look at our, I was just looking at the calendar and the March dates, if we keep with just the 2nd and 4th, and it's possible we're this is I believe this month has 5 weeks. The 9th and the 23rd would again be the dates we would meet, both February 9th and 23rd, as well as March 9th and 23rd. It's possible we may need to add a meeting in there because I think that leaves 3 weeks between the 23rd of February and the 9th of March. So we could try to target it for the March 23rd is the date to have the process completed. Mr. Dennehy, do you think that works? Okay. And Ms. Collins, since you'd be leading this, are you okay with that? Okay. All right. Thank you. We'll circulate the form from last year, and I think the process would be for Ms. Collins and Mr. Dennehy to meet to discuss the timeline as well as when we would need Mr. Dennehy's self-evaluation, and then when we need the board to report to Ms. Collins their comments.
You're going to have to come back to do it next year. Katie, you're going to have to come back to do it next year.
Someone else will have to take that one over next year, although I think I am going to volunteer to do the annual report in the summer and send it to the board for consideration. Then you can all tweak it and take it from there. I don't want to leave that one behind. All right, so we're on to meeting minutes. We have December 8th, December 22nd, and January 4th. I actually had some comments on the 22nd. I was hoping we might defer that and act on the other two. You know, if everyone is comfortable doing that. Did anyone have any comments on the minutes for the 8th? I think I actually did have, there was on page 3, I recused myself from the discussion of the opioid litigation, but I want to just be sure that the description is correct from one of the other members who was here for that discussion.
Madam Chair, do you have edits that you want to make there or no?
Since I recused myself, I don't. It wasn't clear to me whether that was. I just wanted to be sure that the description was correct. Actually, I did have some comments on the special town meeting, but they're pretty minor. I can just report what they are. Actually, on the first page, I think in the executive session motion, we just need to also add a sentence that says the board will return to open session to address the other agenda items. And then I don't have a page number, but under the special town meeting of February 28th, it's really that just substitute the word include for pursue the citizens petition so that it says include the citizens petition in the warrant. Would not include the citizens petition in the warrant.
So Madam Chair, if it's okay, I'd make a motion to approve the minutes for December 8th, subject to your final comments here tonight. Final edits.
Okay, the other one would be that we have to add the time that the meeting adjourned. So they're just small typo or technical type corrections. Okay, so the meeting of the 8th, so the motion is made to approve the meeting minutes with minor corrections. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Zulus. Any discussion? Okay, then all in favor of approving the minutes of December 8th. Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
And Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Okay. Is the board comfortable with deferring the minutes of the 22nd? there's a few things in the minutes that I think in particular, like deleting website references. Lynn, I really appreciate your putting that into the minutes because it's very comprehensive, but I think we could probably delete that and a little bit of the detail. If everyone's comfortable with that, maybe we could then just act on the January 4th minutes. I had no comments on that.
Madam
That
Chair,
was
I'll
the-
make a motion, I'll make a motion to approve the January 4th minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor, Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Thank you all, and thank you to Lynn for all of your work on the minutes. Item 21, we have a request that from the Assistant Town Administrator and the Town Administrator to authorize the advertising of a request for proposals for an employee benefits consultant or a health benefits consultant, which has been Cook and Company for the last many years. Mr. Dennehy, do you want to report on that?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm looking for permission tonight from the board to put out a request for proposal for just that, employee benefits brokerage and consulting services. To your point, Cook and Company has done an exemplary job of performing this task for the town since I've been here and long before that. We were approached by a couple of companies, some larger companies that are providing that service to some municipalities in Greater Boston. So we thought it would be prudent to put out an RFP and see what's out there, similar to what we did with auditing services. And it could be that Cook and Company is the company and they're providing the service that we're looking for, or there could be another company out there that meets the growing needs of our community.
Madam Chair, would you want to entertain a motion?
Yes, Mr. Doyle.
Madam Chair, I will then move authorization to advertise a request for proposals for employee/health benefits consultant or consultation.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? All in favor, Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Town Administrators Report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have one small item tonight. For those of you that follow Mike Dennehy, I'm an avid fan of hockey. And last night, a Milton native broke a record. He's one of the most professional athletes that you'll find. Keith Yandel, who grew up on Fairbanks Road, became the Iron Man in the NHL. Mr. Yandel played in 965 consecutive games. The last professional ice hockey game he missed was on March 26th of 2009. And just to put it in perspective, his defensive partner for the Philadelphia Flyers last night was 8 years old the last time he missed a hockey game. So I just want to congratulate Keith. 965 games. He is officially the Iron Man in the NHL. So congratulations, Keith. And that's all I have.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. Thank you. Fairbanks Road, Mr. Zulus.
There's a proud sports tradition on Fairbanks Road.
Okay, I have no report this evening. Does anyone have a report?
None here, Madam Chair.
Mr. Zulus,
Nothing, Madam Chair.
Ms. Collins,
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Wells.
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, we didn't have any public comment this evening, so I assume there's no response to anything from a prior meeting. Future agenda dates, we've already discussed some priorities. If anyone does have any items for a future agenda that we haven't already talked about, if you could please let Lynn DiNapoli know, that would be, or the town administrator, that would be helpful. Community happenings. I am not aware of anything that we should announce for a community happening. Does anyone know of anything coming up that we should publicize?
Madam, Mr. Wells, and then
Mr. Wells.
Go ahead, Michael, you go first. I'll go after.
Rabbi Benjamin reached out. He's putting together a ice hockey game and skate at Milton Academy on February 13th. So he reached out to the town. I subsequently put him in touch with Pat Lovett, who's the director of Milton Youth Hockey. So There's some ice on February 13th during midday, which is Super Bowl Sunday, but it won't conflict with anyone that wants to watch the Super Bowl. But I really appreciate Rabbi Benjamin both putting this together and asking for the town's support in putting some teams out there and getting a little game together and then a free skate afterwards. So thank you, Rabbi Benjamin. For more information, you can call me at Town Hall, 617-898-4845. And again, I put him in touch with Pat Lovett from Milton Youth Hockey. So it should be a great event.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you. Mr. Wells.
Just, we're a few months out, Madam Chair, but we had our first meeting this week, and I just want to confirm that Milton Music Fest 2022 will be held on Saturday, June 25th, and Sunday, June 26th. And I'm sure, just as last year, very COVID-weary winter, and we'll all be ready for it by then.
Okay, that sounds good. Great. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, hearing none, then we can adjourn the select board meeting. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay, and now we will call to order the Governor Stoughton trustees meeting. And we have one item on the agenda, which is an update and a request from the Milton Residence Fund, and Noreen Dolan is joining us. Noreen, thank you for coming in after 9 p.m. and waiting around for this agenda item. We appreciate your patience, and you're coming in this evening. So we all have a memo from you and a summary report, but why don't we give you an opportunity? This is a good opportunity also for the residents of the town to hear what all the good things that the Milton Residence Fund does and what the needs might be.
Sure. Thank you very much. And you all, I'm sure, have had a very long agenda, so you've had a long night. But thank you for letting me join. Myself and Trustee Roger Gray of the Milton Residence Fund is listening in as well.
If he'd like to be moved up, we can move him up as a panelist.
Okay.
So why don't we do that? Would that be the NBQ? Okay, I see a hand raised. So why don't we move him over to, let's move Mr. Gray over to panelist. And go ahead, Noreen. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Sure, no, thank you. We have, the Milton Residence Fund overall has distributed about 200,000 in funding over the calendar year 2021. In the similar types of funds that we've done before, majority of it for housing, but second, closely followed by heating, so gas and oil and electricity. There's been some minor requests for some medical co-pays or things like hearing aid assistance for elders. And then, a big group of summer camp ships. And then some random kind of requests that we're able to fill with community donations, such as small car repairs or things that don't fit into the Governor Stoughton Trust or the Copeland Family Foundation. Specific to Governor Stoughton, the grant that was provided to the Milton Residence Fund was $80,000 per detail in the document that I sent. The majority of those funds are spent, it looks like, between April and June, I want to say. What did I write in here? It's mostly when the winter moratorium ends from the utility companies. It means shut-off notices go out again for anyone that had a protection on the account. So I'm expecting that similar spike at the end of this winter. And camper ships you can register your kids in April. So looking at the numbers, what we use the Governor Stoughton funds for, looks like one of the biggest expenses, as we've discussed in previous years, was those camper ships. 12 youth enrolled in the Park and Rec with our assistance with the Governor Stoughton funds. One child who was too young for Park and Rec, we helped enroll for a little bit of Camp Cunningham that wasn't already approved for financial aid. And then 4 children were recommended by the Milton Public Schools for the summer enrichment program, like summer school type programming. So those were approved as well to support those students because they were from low-income families and needing extra assistance. I'm trying to think of things that weren't kind of written down. I mean, we worked closely with the Milton Public Schools this year for the holiday gift program again, with the PTOs, with My Brother's Keeper. And it was, say, 180 Milton children were helped, and 108 Milton parents also received some gifts through that. The needs were pretty in line with previous years. We kept kind of waiting to see where COVID would make things a little more treacherous for families. I think there was a lot of assistance programs in town. The Milton Community Food Pantry is amazing and worked super hard to get food assistance and through your help, you know, milk and egg vouchers. So I think between the Milton Residence Fund and a lot of other community supports, families were relatively stabilized. But I keep being warned kind of that things may increase as government supports wind down. So I'm still waiting to see, but it was about, I'd say, what I write here, 6,000 a month in assistance that I used from the Governor Stoughton funds in previous years. So, I mean, I could keep going on, but I'm wondering if there's any questions from the trustees of Governor Stoughton specific to the use of funds or the Milton Residence Fund in general that I could answer.
Does any member of the board have a question or a comment? Ms. Collins.
Well, thank you, Ms. Dolan, and thank you to the trustees as well. Are there requests that have been coming in that you really couldn't fulfill because people fall outside the income range and you just didn't have enough community funds, or are you seeing some unusual kinds of requests?
Not so much, maybe sadly is the right word. Most people that do apply do fall at or below the 300% of the federal poverty level guideline that I use. So most families are, you know, working 1, 2, 3 jobs and are still falling below that, which is pretty heartbreaking. But, you know, and it's interesting, a lot of people in Milton are working in the medical field and working in really challenging jobs and are still falling below that. Maybe medical assistants or, you know, working towards education. I'd say the things that I generally can't fund through maybe the Copeland funds or through Governor Stoughton, where I don't feel as such a fit that I do fund through community donations, is I've had maybe 5 or 6 young people in Milton who are enrolled in college or enrolling in college, and they're all from Milton High graduates, or, you know, local kids, and they're falling short between the financial aid and the tuition. And it's a matter of, you know, $1,000 or $2,000 that they need cash on hand to make that payment for the semester. And I really hate to see somebody not graduate because of $1,000 or $2,000, and they're still going to graduate with tons of loans that they need to repay, but that they don't have that couple thousand. And so that's what I've been looking to fill. And there are some amazing community donors in Milton that I've been able to reach out to that have stepped up. But that's the kind of thing that you can see a great long-term benefit of that type of assistance that hasn't traditionally been with the fund, because the fund generally, I mean, keeping families housed and utilities on, medical is super, super important, but it's also nice to balance it with some longer term professional development things that I see have great potential.
Thank you very much. I think that goes along with what the trustees have talked to us about by way of pathways out of poverty. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Azulis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Noreen, do you envision any way that the fund could provide assistance for mental health needs or services, since that seems to be increasingly prevalent as we come through the pandemic?
That's really interesting question. I haven't thought too much about it. Most families or individuals that apply do have health insurance of some kind, being in Massachusetts. I did not this year, but in previous years, some clients that needed their copays on their therapist appointments, and to be able to maintain therapy either Zoom or in person, they had copays, and the copays were something like, you know, $20, but it wasn't something they had. So there was a one-time grant I had given someone, minimal, you know, $200 or $300, but that helped them get therapy for a year. So it felt like a solid investment to be able to help maintain them. It doesn't come up often, but maybe it's because I don't, you know, like advertise that that's even an option. But I do know a lot of individuals that are struggling to maintain employment because of, you know, significant anxiety or depression or things that are hindering their ability that way. So I wonder the copays. But a lot of people are having trouble finding therapists. I know for children and for adults, it's hard even to get virtual appointments at this. There's long waiting lists. But I'd certainly be open to any ideas that anyone had to be able to support mental health services.
Noreen, I know we've talked about this in the past, and obviously you want to spend the money very cautiously and manage the resources that you have for all of the needs that you have. I view this, and I suspect most of or all of the board members view this as the Milton Residence Fund and the dairy program through the Equity House are really primary ways that the town in recent years, or probably in recent decades, has dispersed the funds from the Governor Stoughton Trust and used the funds to accomplish the objectives of Governor Stoughton in his will, which was to benefit the poor. And there are housing, you know, Ms. Collins has done a lot of work looking at trying to see what we can do with the town farm 4 acres in terms of affordable housing. So there's other ways that we can try to address the needs, but it seems that the Milton Residence Fund and the dairy voucher program really are direct ways that we impact daily lives of people, and we benefit the poor. So your request, it looks like, is you're anticipating needing $75,000 to $80,000 for emergency demands over the next 12 months. You got a little bit left from what we paid out last year. You know, I think we want to be using the income that the Governor Stoughton Trust is generating annually to do as much as we can for the poor. So if there's additional services, whether it's utilities or the summer camps, or I think you had housing here, housing assistance, or the educational or the medical services that you've talked about, you know, please feel free to come back, especially during the COVID environment. That's one of the things that we really emphasized was I was anticipating that we would have an additional request at some point. So I know you have funds from the Copeland Foundation, you have funds that are provided through the Swift Fund and the others at the First Parish Church, but we really should be looking to try to make sure that we're directing as much as we can from the Governor Stoughton Fund in a given year to organizations, and specifically the Milton Residence Fund, I think, to achieve the objectives of the trust, which is to help to benefit the poor. This seems to me that there may be an opportunity for us to help fund some additional needs. I'm guessing that some of these, just look again at the housing assistance was just over $25,000, and it may, if someone is working 3 jobs and still having difficulty paying some of these bills, I'm wondering if there's anything additional that we might be able to do. As you know, at one time, the Governor Stoughton Trust just a few years ago didn't really have very many resources, so we were contributing a much lower amount, and we've increased it substantially in light of the fact that the sale to Pulte took place. But it may be that we can actually go a little bit higher than the 75 to 80, since the only other requests really are coming from the hospital and the dairy request from the food pantry. But so I would encourage you to just keep that in mind as you go forward. As Mr. Zulus mentioned, the mental health needs, there may be some other areas that either you haven't been able to fund previously, or maybe haven't been able to fund enough, that people who are working those 3 jobs and still not being able to pay the utilities might need some additional assistance. I think that's something that the Governor Stoughton trustees can and should and would be very willing to look at in whether the $80,000 could be increased
Okay.
to help the residents fund. So
Absolutely. Okay,
please
thank you.
do keep that in
Because
mind.
I'm very cognizant of not like over asking and sort of like hoarding money just in case requests come in, trying to be honest in what the average payment has been. And as Ms. Collins had said, that there aren't requests that that are coming in that I'm denying, saying I don't have money for, that I
Okay.
really have been able to assist. There's some clients that maybe aren't in Milton, like don't meet some of the requirements. But overall, I have, I fund a majority of the requests that, we find a way to be able to help. I think in terms of, I am from an affordable housing background, so I know a lot about housing vouchers, and I'm supportive of affordable housing. And I always try to balance, like, vouchers are permanent housing subsidies. And so I'm cognizant of not being a permanent housing subsidy sort of with the fund. And we've assisted in general up to 3 months of rental assistance. But I'm thinking as you're talking, maybe there are cases that there's a significant medical illness, or I know there's been significant, medical concern for somebody that needed longer than that, and so maybe there are instances that we could assist longer than that with funds available from Governor Stoughton in order to allow the family to get back on their feet.
Well,
So
and I think it was before your term, but during my early years on the board, because it's been quite a while since we've had this come up, but the Governor Stoughton trustees from time to time are having executive session to entertain a specific request relating to someone with a long-term medical condition that needed some additional help. And so what you're saying makes sense. You're managing this process. You're managing the funds conservatively and responsibly, which is great, and what you have to do. But there may be an opportunity for the Governor Stoughton Fund to provide a little bit more and to address, if not to get involved in the area of a long-term subsidy, but to on an ad hoc basis or one-on-one, somebody coming in with a unique circumstance that might need more than the 3 months. Maybe they need 5 months. The Governor Stoughton Fund may be able to help you in those circumstances to provide some additional assistance to a resident who is in need. So it's just something to keep in mind.
yes, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
obviously we thank you for managing it conservatively
Yeah.
and responsibly,
Yeah,
but
I don't want
there
to
may
make
be
it
more that
seem
we
like
can do here.
I don't want to make it seem like I'm like holding money back. Because there is other instances where individuals or families are amazing and they get into these payment plans with utilities, and if you make a payment of say $100, they forgive $200. It's an arrearage management plan, but still coming up with that $100 every month is still hard. So in some instances I was able to help them assist that for 6 months, because overall it was the best benefit for all of us because the utility company threw in that extra money. So there are longer term kind of payment arrangements that we can help with, and that would be helpful with Governor Stoughton.
And before I go to my two colleagues who have their hands raised, I'm almost tempted to offer a motion to increase the amount over the 80,000. The other side of that is we could approve that request tonight, and you could always come back during the course of the year. But I think we want to encourage you to feel free to come back at a later date as the need may arise.
Great, thank you.
So Mr. Wells, I believe, is first, and then Mr. Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This Milton Residence Fund is one of the few things that now, because I'm on this board, I am able to be involved in 2 roles in my life, and another hat that I wear as well as this one. But knowing you come to this board, and I look at you historically with the same humility that Sherry Dozer brought 25 years ago, and her and Diane Ferrari for all her years. And I've listened to all of your points tonight, and I think about just the relationships, organizations like My Brother's Keeper, and those that, now, they're out there every day doing this. So my motion is going to be to increase it to 85,000. I think, Madam Chair, you probably knew I was going to do that when you saw my hand up. And specifically, one of the reasons I want to do that too is because, to Mr. Zulis's point about mental health, you are correct. The mental health issue now is it's being able to pay those co-pays, and being able to keep your therapist, and being able to get in to the front of that queue where you're getting help. So my motion is going to be to increase their request, hourly award to $85,000. And thank you for everything,
Okay.
Maureen.
Thank you.
So are you offering that as a motion, Richard? Or
I am, Madam Chair, I'm making a motion to approve $85,000 request from the Governor Stone Fund to the
Do we have a
Milton Residence
second?
Fund.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All right. Mr. Doyle had his hand raised, so I'd like to go to him since I had already recognized him next. And I don't know, you're going to speak to this motion, Arthur, or you
No,
probably
Madam
touched
Chair,
on it.
I'd be very comfortable if you took the vote, then I could ask
Okay.
the question, Noreen.
Okay. And I was actually going to go to a higher amount than that, Richard. So I'm glad
I'll
that you
accept-
increased it
I'll
above their account. Well,
Madam
I
Chair,
think-
I'll accept any.
Well, I think why don't we encourage Noreen to then come back during the year as the needs. So because there is a little bit of a balance left. So I'm glad you increased it a little bit. And I think we can at least, and we got Mr. Gray from the trustees here who can report to the board that whatever can be done here. Obviously, we have investment earnings on the Governor Stoughton Fund every year that we want to be sure we're making the maximum use of. So do we have any other discussion on the motion for $85,000 for the Milton Residence Fund? Okay, then we'll go to the vote. Mr. Doyle.
Yes.
Mr. Zulus.
Yes.
Ms. Collins.
Yes.
Mr. Wells.
Absolutely.
And myself, yes. Okay. Then let's go to Mr. Doyle for his comments.
Thank you, Noreen, and to your colleagues for all of the work that you do. This is such a valuable asset to our community. I'd like to ask about communication, about the availability of funding through the Governor Stoughton Fund. Can you share a little bit of information about that? How, for example, would some people who are relatively new to the town of Milton, who are faced with adverse circumstances on a last minute basis, know to go to seek support from the Governor Stoughton Fund?
Yes, that's a very good question. So any family with children in the Milton Public Schools, I work very closely with the Milton Public Schools family liaison, Marty McKenna O'Keefe. So any family with children that reaches out to a guidance counselor or to the family liaison, if they need funds for things, like one family recently was moved to Milton from a homeless shelter and they didn't have beds. And so they reported to the guidance counselor that they had one bed and they were all sleeping in the same bed. So they reached out to me. I was able to order mattresses, box spring frames, delivery. And then I went on Amazon and ordered sheets and towels and everything, get them going. And then we got clothing donation through Milton Neighbors. So it's a very close relationship there. Also through the food pantry, I'm on the board of the Milton Community Food Pantry, and they're already amazing and kind of connect through the schools. The school is constantly sending out newsletters every week about resources in the town, of which they mention us and the food pantry. So they're trying to either if somebody comes to them or sending newsletter kind of updates. So a lot of families connect with us through that. Then there's a lot of word of mouth of neighbors and people talking to each other, which is helpful. And then the Milton Times has been very helpful, placing, articles and explaining about holiday programs. I recently purchased a kind of a thank you ad to our donors in the Milton Times and noted at the bottom that if anyone does need assistance to reach out. So, trying to work with the networks that are already connected. We also are connected to QCAP in Quincy that does the fuel assistance program for Milton and Quincy. So if anyone is applying for government fuel assistance, they're also referred back and then I refer that way. So trying to kind of hook into the network that's already there and support each of the providers. But certainly always looking for additional connection points as well, if anyone has any additional suggestions.
Thank you.
And that's one benefit of coming into the select board meeting and giving a report, so that we always have new residents moving into town and someone may turn on the TV and watch the discussion, or it'll be reported in the Times and they might hear about it that way also. Mr. Gray, while you're here, is there anything that you would like to add?
No, I just, again, would love to thank the board for all the support and thank Noreen for all of her efforts. It wouldn't happen without everything that she does. So thank you for the funding, and we'll certainly put it to very good use and give good stewardship of it as we've tried over the years.
Madam Chair, has anyone noticed Ms. Collins's face during this entire discussion? Her face has been beaming since you announced this agenda item. So since the second you brought it up.
I thought it was because of your additional $5,000.
Listen, I was hoping Katie was going to raise it to 100.
That's the number I had in mind, but I think it would be good if, as Noreen goes through the next several months and we get into the, I won't be here, Melinda won't be on the board, but you'll have a couple of new Governor Stoughton trustees at that point to deal with. But as you get into next fall and winter, you may find that there's a need for a supplemental request, and keep it in mind.
I mean, I'm always nervous about utility bills. Like I mentioned, I'm suspecting that people are going to have utility bills of like $3,000 or $4,000, like something crazy when the shutoff notices start going out. So, I mean, if you all have the kind of stomach for it as well, I can give greater payments towards those. You know, in the past, I know Diane, it was generally 500 or 1,000. You know, I certainly do need to go to 1,200 or 1,500 sometimes. But you know, sometimes if the utility company needs 2,000 and then a payment arrangement for the final 1,000, you know, we know that we have the funding there to make some arrangements happen. So,
well, as you know, the Governor Stoughton Fund has more interest income now than it did back in 2017 or 2018 prior to the sale to Pulte. So it's just something to keep in mind, especially as we come out of the COVID environment and some of the federal assistance and other programs start that have been wearing off. Then you may get some additional requests as people start getting back into back to normal or back to somewhat normal, or the new normal, whatever the right terminology is these days.
Yeah.
2022, no normal.
Yeah. I know it was like pre-COVID, we had never approved internet as a utility, as like an urgent utility, but there was one person working as a teaching assistant that couldn't afford her internet. And so then she couldn't keep her job if she didn't make the internet payment. And so I was like, oh, that is a worthwhile payment because it's a utility, it's going to keep you employed. And then Milton Public Schools did great with, you know, was a hotspots and different internet, but there was certainly some people that couldn't access internet. So that was kind of a new request that seemed more important during COVID. So anyway, thank you very much.
Does anyone else have anything tonight for Ms. Dolan or Mr. Gray? Then if not, thank you very much for your time and for waiting, and for a great report. We appreciate all the detail you sent us, and thank you for all that you do.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you all.
Most welcome. Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Do we have a motion to adjourn the Governor Stoughton trustee meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you all. See you on the 9th. Have a good night.
We're done?
Good night, everyone.
Wow. Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Belinda, I apologize for today. I'll buzz you in the morning early. No. Just text me. I'm giving blood at noontime, but if you text me sometime in the morning, I'll call you right then before your meeting.
Gotcha.
Sounds good. Thanks.